welcome back. On today's podcast, I have invited Joyce Musakewa, a trained trauma counselor specializing in narcissistic abuse, impacts of suicide, and adult survivors of adverse childhood experiences. Welcome, Joyce, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Vermont. It's an honor for me to be on your podcast today.
Can you explain maybe a little bit about what adverse childhood experiences are and how does that play a role on mental health?
So adverse childhood experiences are experiences that occur in childhood. These experiences include things like physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical neglect, watching domestic abuse happen between parents, and things like having a household member suffer mental illness, and also things like parental separation or divorce. These are things that would have happened in childhood that would have impacts upon adults later in life. The study of adverse childhood experiences was done in the US by Kaiser Permanente. And so this study actually showed the fact that these experiences do tend to impact people in their adulthood. So they can result in negative affective states such as anger, fear, loss, guilt, shame, and cognitive effects like self-blame. And these all prevent young people from living their best lives and would all contribute to mental health issues. So it was found that adverse childhood experiences place people at a higher risk for things like substance abuse, high-risk sexual activities, and relationship problems, etc., later in life. And they've also been found to cause things like psychological problems such as major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, personality disorder, and suicidal ideation, etc.
And things like, seeing separation and divorce amongst parents it's so common. So
Yes.
we wouldn't typically think of these things as having such a big impact on later adulthood life.
Yes. Unfortunately, our society has experienced an increase in divorce, meaning that this particular type of adverse childhood experience is relatively common. And yes, it does tend to play out in different ways in terms of sometimes a breakdown of the family system as the child knows it. And sometimes it can involve things like the child getting stuck in the middle of conflict between parents that are at war with one another and the impact of that. And sometimes it extends to things such as just feeling less than because everybody else's parents are together and your parents are not together, and just feeling different from one's peers, which can impact self-esteem. So there is a positive, however, in that different children relate to adversities in a different way. So there's on one hand the adverse childhood experience, but there are other factors as well that can help increase the resilience that is needed for the child to be able to get through these experiences. So there's the experience and then there's the resilience, which is the good news in all of this. Yeah.
I guess what do people need to be aware of to help children increase their resilience and adversity towards these issues?
So, in terms of increasing resilience, I guess support from maternal and paternal figures or from the adults, setting good modeling examples for behavior as well as just reassuring children that in situations like that, it's not their fault.
Mm-hmm.
And so a good support system is very crucial, as well as, you know, having access to mental health care, and as well, just giving children the platform to be able to express themselves and express their feelings, and listening to them and validating their feelings and reassuring them that they're safe and that they
Mm-hmm.
can trust the figures that are there to take care of them and protect them. And it's giving them messages that the world is a safe place, and that checking in with their view of themselves, of other people, and of the world, just ensuring that it's healthy. And
Mm-hmm.
um, and also just doing things to increase their self-esteem and encouraging them as well, among several things.
Yeah. Wow. Um, and sometimes like we don't think about some of these pieces, like even if two parents have separated and divorced, they're still
Mhm.
they should still be able to um I guess be able to communicate and show that, you know, they're show their child that even though maybe in a relationship wise things don't work out, they can still be friendly towards each other and resolve certain um, issues or certain things that involve around the child, and those are the pieces that the child will pick up, right?
Yes, that's right. And also, just realizing that divorce in itself is something that's very stressful, even to both the parents themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So encouraging the parents to take care of themselves, right? And to fill their cup, so
Mm-hmm.
that they can in turn seek their own help and support, so that they can in turn support the child. And they can also just set aside their differences as adults and come
Yeah.
together to just insulate their child from this huge change that has happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it is important, but there are instances where one parent might be personality disordered. So then that makes it very difficult to have an amicable co-parenting relationship. So in
Mm-hmm.
that case, then safety is crucial, and just real modeling, and seeking help from the other parent is very important as well. And and just making sure that the child can talk about how they're feeling, and as well not sharing too much detail about the other parent with the child.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So they don't take
Wow.
full responsibility upon their
Yeah.
shoulders. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like there's a lot of pieces that play a role into adverse childhood experiences, and how to navigate that and help children grow up to, um, I guess, not lead into things like alcohol and drug abuse and all those pieces. Really requires a lot of support, a lot of education, both for the child and I guess just adults in general, in the general population.
Yeah. And it's good to know too that not every child of divorce ends up, you know, abusing alcohol or doing self-destructive acts. Again, it
Hmm.
depends on the resilience, it depends on the support, and it depends on the modeling and
Hmm.
the health of the environment through which the child grows up post
Hmm.
the divorce as well.
Yeah.
So just being aware of things to take note of, and
Mhm.
just doing the best to mitigate some of those things, so that the children don't feel like they're alone and they've got nobody to talk to, and that they've got no help. And so
Mhm.
they don't feel that, you know, they're the only ones who are, whose family has disintegrated, and that nothing will ever be the same. They'll never feel any joy, that kind of thing. So children just really need security and to feel loved and to feel that nothing, it's not their fault.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that is only one piece of the adverse childhood experiences that we kind of only dipped our toes into.
Yeah.
And I guess, what got you interested in focusing on trauma in your counseling work?
Well, I actually got interested in focusing in trauma because I am a child of divorce myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I am of an African background. So things like divorce were things that were kept very hush hush.
Mm.
So we were not really allowed to, I wasn't given a platform really to say what I thought about everything that happened and how I felt about the breakdown of my own family system. And, you know, having to move from a beautiful house where I had lots of friends to a tiny little place that had no garden and that kind of thing. So that in itself was traumatic for me. So that from a place of having enough to a place of poverty because of the breakdown of the family system, that was traumatic to me in itself. And also the loss of the relationship between me and my father after the divorce. So that was something that was actually traumatic for me as well. So there was a time when I was growing up, and I sought mental health help. That was when I was in my teenage years, because I always grew up with a sense of just not being enough and low self-esteem. Because back then, I didn't really know many people whose parents were divorced. So I kind of also felt that I was the only one going through that situation, and I couldn't talk to anyone. And generally in the African population, I mean, it's gotten a bit better now, but people don't sit down and air out their feelings. And I was looking for that. So when I started university, I started feeling feelings of anxiety and low self-esteem. And I went to look for someone to speak to. And I could not, and back then there was only one therapist in the city that I lived in. And so I went there expecting to speak to someone about how I felt. And I was actually shut down and given a wad of antidepressants.
Oh.
So, so I took them, and I started, and I found that I was gaining weight with them, and I discarded them. So in the end, I just suppressed my feelings. And it was only when I came to Canada and was able to see that, you know, people talked a little bit more about mental health, and that there was health, that there was help that could be obtained. That then I went to seek my own counseling for those issues, and to my surprise, I felt better about things. So then it was then that I decided that I would want to pursue this career and be able to help people with things. So I don't only focus on adverse childhood experiences or divorce. I focus on those issues that are culturally stigmatized, that make people feel lesser than, and that make people feel unheard, that people sometimes can't talk to their parents or to people who are close to them about those things. So I make myself the one that's available to speak to people about things like that. I mean, things like surviving the loss of a suicide the loss through suicide of a family member. Things like issues around shame and betrayal, and things like narcissistic abuse, which is a type of emotional abuse that happens through a lot of manipulation, through a lot of this interplay between being idealized and being devalued. So that's something that many people are now beginning to become aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So I help people with that. I help people who suffer from loneliness. Perhaps they were never married and it wasn't their choice. And sometimes it's difficult to speak to people about that, but society sort of stigmatizes those people, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and calls them and sort of puts them in another category, especially within the immigrant community.
Mm-hmm.
It's even worse. So I try to help people with things that they can't talk to others about easily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kind of like your experience of wanting to seek help and be able to talk through what you were going through, but then sometimes going through that medical route, you just get some pills prescribed to you, and somehow that's supposed to make everything all better, which is,
Exactly.
we know, is not the case, right?
Yes, yes.
Definitely medication is helpful, but it needs to be paired with being able to talk through things, being able to see a counselor and work through those issues.
Exactly. I mean, medication is useful for those that really, really need it. But you know, from my experience as a mental health counselor, a lot of it might be trauma that needs to be processed. So I
Mm-hmm.
do EMDR therapy to help process so traumatic memories.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, if you pair that with things like seeking support from close friends and family, you know, increasing one's social base, you know, nurturing good and fulfilling friendships, self care like exercise, eating nutritious foods, getting enough sleep, things like mindfulness and meditation, and just nurturing oneself and talking to a counselor, sometimes that can take away the need for medication. So I feel like in my case, all I wanted was that, for someone to tell me just that. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like because I did not get that, I was in pain for a long, long time, much longer than I should. So if I'd
Mm-hmm.
gotten it at that point when I started my teen years, I feel like the trajectory of my life or the quality of my life might have been better. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what I seek to do to educate young people about these things and to get them to be encouraged to seek help early, because that determines the course of their lives. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it determines the choices that you make. You know, if your self-esteem is low or if you're feeling anxious and depressed and you beat upon yourself and you self blame, you're not going to make the choices, right, that
Mm-hmm.
utilize your fullest potential. So it's an interplay of things that then impact you at a later stage. But if caught early, you know, things could have been different, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
Mm.
I guess, what would you tell your younger self at that time?
You know, at that time, I'd have told my younger self to relax and enjoy my youth, but to make good choices so that the older me would be happy with the choices that I made in future
Mm-hmm.
years. I would
Mm-hmm.
have told my younger self to do everything and anything that I could to nurture my self esteem. Because as we just discussed, it's the basis from which you will make choices in your life that will impact you either positively or negatively. I would also tell my younger self that I do not really have to form my identity over my early family circumstances or what happened in my childhood, and that I am an individual with the power or agency to choose who I am going to become in this world and how I'm going to show up. So I'd say to my younger self, I'd also say to my younger self, you know, I admire how you always seem to befriend and talk to those that may be looked down upon by society, and how you're able to see the humanity and the human spirit within them without judgment. And I'd say this will serve you well in your future career as a counselor. I think that's what I'd say to my younger self.
That's amazing. And I think maybe more people should be able to talk to their younger self, um, with the knowledge and the life experiences that they have currently.
Yes, but unfortunately, the reverse always occurs. You get the experience at a later stage. But
Mhm.
if you were to get the knowledge and experience early in life and embrace it and accept it, and if you let that guide your steps, I feel like life would be much more enjoyable. And you can't avoid adversity, but you
Mhm.
would be in a position to be able to overcome a bit better and
Mhm.
to tap into that wisdom and knowledge a bit better and to know where to find help a bit better.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's different now. We've got social media. One can
Mhm.
connect to a counselor online all over the world. It was
Mhm.
not like that growing up. That was before the age of the internet. So now
Yeah.
it's all different ball games. So there's
Yeah.
opportunities and much, much better help out there.
Mhm. And with that, I think, with the technology and with social media, it's, mental health has definitely changed. It's
Mhm.
People are more aware of it, and a lot more accepting and open to, getting that help. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
there's probably still a long ways to go, but it's definitely improving.
Oh, yes.
Hmm.
Definitely it is. And the good thing is that there's a lot of research going on now. So there's a lot of evidence-based research, evidence-based therapeutic interventions. So there's always, I feel, something for someone. If
Hmm.
one thing doesn't work for someone, something else might work better.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's great opportunities. One has to just be able to reach out and tap into them. One has to feel that they are worth it and that their life is worth doing that for themselves and that
Hmm.
they've got as much right to enjoy the gift of life as everybody else. You
Yeah.
know, yeah.
I guess a lot of people might be wondering,
Mhm.
does it get easier? Does life get easier?
I feel like if you're lucky, life gets easier, but you're always going to have something to deal with or struggle with,
Hmm.
right? So I feel like you can't really control what's coming at you, but you can control your reaction to it. So it
For
might get
sure.
easier, it might not get easier,
Hmm.
but how do you respond to it? How resilient are you? How much armor do you have to face
Hmm.
whatever battle is going to come your way? And
Hmm.
that's going to determine overall for you what experience you're going to get. So if you arm yourself with the tools that are needed, if you get the help that you need, if you pay attention to your body and you nurture yourself, when you're tired, you go and rest. When you feel like you need to speak to somebody, you speak to somebody, and you know who your support system is. Those people that will love you and support you and not judge you. And you consciously and effortfully make decisions to exercise, to eat healthy, to do things that you enjoy. I feel overall your response to it will make things easier in the
For
end,
sure.
no matter
Hmm.
what it is that's coming to you.
Hmm. It's kind of like
Yes.
your own outlook on it, right?
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
matter of perspective, right? Two
Hmm.
people can have the same experience and experience it very, very different. So if you're
Hmm.
able to adopt a healthier perspective, and if you're able to feel grounded and whole within yourself, and to just feel that you are capable of solving your own problems, you've got the agency, and you empower yourself, I feel like your experience will definitely be much better than if you don't.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, how were you able to cope during your struggles and during the things that you've gone through?
Do you know what I find? Well, I was able to seek, first of all, trauma counseling. And that was 20 years after that point when I was a teenager hunting around for a therapist. So for 20 years, I was suppressing my emotions, but I was able to seek help for that. And that helped me a great deal. So in terms of how I cope with everyday struggles, is I do a gratitude. I find gratitude very helpful. Do a
Me
gratitude
too.
meditation, yeah, every
Hmm.
morning. And it doesn't have to be anything. Sometimes I do it, when my alarm clock goes off, when I'm lying in bed, I can get a 10-minute one off of YouTube. And I find that it lifts my mood. And I do tap into my spirituality as well.
Hmm.
But so I always start the day with that gratitude meditation. And I actually find that the days when I don't do that, my mood is somewhat down. It just sort of dictates the mood for the day. I make time every day to do something that nurtures me, even if it's for 5 minutes, whether it means listening to a beautiful piece of music, um, uh, listening to a short, uplifting motivational speech. Doesn't have to take much time. Take time to move in some way. In the summer, I would always take a walk. And in the walk, um, make sure that I tap into all my senses, sense of smell, smelling all the flowers, sense of touch, feeling the wind against my skin, sense of sight, looking at all the gardens, that kind of thing, sense of sound, listening to the birds singing. So in the winter, what I tend to do is I tend to do some jump rope every morning
Mm.
just to give myself an energy boost,
Hmm.
even if it's for like 5 or 10 minutes. So I don't usually take a lot of time because I'm very busy, but I always do something. So when I have time, I'll do things like take a relaxing bubble bath, or I'll read a really good book, or I'll just simply burn some aromatic scents, just do some aromatherapy.
Hmm.
Or sometimes just watch a good movie, depending on the time. But no matter what, I just take some time to always just do something for myself, at
Hmm.
least. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really really important.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's important because I found that if I do that, if I do something for myself, then I'm taking the time to say to myself, you know what, you matter. And then I'm
Hmm.
going to expect others to treat me as if I matter, right?
Hmm.
So then I'm going to hopefully not accept ill treatment or disrespect from others, or
Hmm.
not listen to negative voices, maybe from the past or from somewhere. So you just increase your sense of mattering within yourself by taking those actions for yourself, so
Hmm.
that you eventually begin to understand that you matter, Because as women, we tend to want to do things for everyone else and neglect ourselves. So if
Hmm.
you come back to doing that, you tend to then see your limitations, and you tend to then consider yourself as well in the overall scheme of things.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What would you say to the people who may think or have that guilt of, taking that time for themselves or putting themselves before other people?
I would say that you need to look at yourself as you would. This is something that we always say as therapists,
Hmm.
right? If a friend was treating you the way you treat yourself, right? If a friend was saying things that you say to yourself, what would you say to that friend? Tap into your own resources of advice, and really look beyond, look deeper into how you're treating yourself, the value that you place upon yourself, and see that when you're not taking time for yourself, when you're putting other people beyond yourself, um, you're diminishing yourself in some way,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not being good to yourself. So I'd say to
Mm-hmm.
them, be patient, be kind to yourself, value yourself, because the truth is that you do matter. You matter just as much as the next person. And you
Mm-hmm.
matter just as much as those people that you're abandoning yourself to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you are your own best advocate. You are first and foremost your very own best friend, and act
Mm-hmm.
like it. That's what I would.
Yeah. Yeah. And that also increases your own view of your own self-worth too, right? And
Exactly.
by doing that, it shows yourself how important you are.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you tend to then expect others to view you in that light, in the same light
Mm-hmm.
that you view yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
then, of course, that translates to you perhaps looking at the relationships around you and doing a little mini audit of whether those relationships serve you best, which ones, are bringing you down, and what you're going to do about those relationships. Just sort of building a network of people that honor and nurture you and support you, and that you do the same for likewise, right?
Mm-hmm.
A strong support system that goes both ways. And
For
that in
sure.
turn enhances your life. And our relationships enhance our self esteem as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it starts at the level of ourselves to ourselves.
For sure. Um,
Yeah.
Now, I guess in times when you are having a tough day, or it's just one of those days. Is there a quote or a saying or perhaps a mantra that helps you get through those days?
Yeah, I like the simple one from Winnie the Pooh by Christopher Robin. And it's simply, you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think.
Oh, I love that.
You
Now,
just have to
yeah,
feel it and believe it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And as a therapist, are there any myths about mental health that you wanna put out there and clear the air a little bit?
Yes, and I'm going to speak to you as a therapist of African descent
Hmm.
who has some African clients or immigrant clients. And I'm going to tap into my own history. Back where I come from, there was no spectrum. Now that we've trained in mental health, there's a spectrum in terms of mental health, in terms of, sometimes one's pathology is on the higher end, or sometimes it's on the lower end.
Hmm.
Where I come from, you're either insane or you're normal. There's no
Hmm.
spectrum. And so that is a myth, because there's different levels of mental illness, and there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Hmm.
And that there are different factors that cause mental illness. Sometimes they're biological factors, such as genes, or physical illness,
Hmm.
or injury, or one's brain chemistry. Sometimes they're life experiences that you can't help, such as trauma or a history of abuse, that can cause you to have mental illness. And sometimes you've got a family history of mental health problems. So what you see, the picture that you see, there's a backstory to it, you know.
Hmm.
So everybody has at some point in time experienced mental illness of one sort or another. But sometimes you didn't know. Maybe
Hmm.
sometimes you felt anxiety. Maybe sometimes you felt burnt out, and that translated into feeling a certain level of depression, or a certain level of feeling overwhelmed. So what I'm trying to say is that there's no need for stigmatization, and mental illness is on a spectrum, and that there's different factors that cause um, people to experience different types of mental illness. And
Mhm.
so we should really be more accepting and less stigmatizing of it.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Now, my last question for today's podcast is, if there's one piece of advice you can give our listeners who may be going through something similar, or something that we said today maybe resonated with them, what would that piece of advice be?
Uh, the only piece of advice that I could give is that, you know, we're all in this together. Um, Life does not come without challenges. It's a combination of beauty, of joy, of just reveling in the beauty of creation. And it's also a combination of pain and challenges. If you notice, the world is two-sided in nature. There's happy, sad, good, bad, black, white,
Mm-hmm.
tall, short. So it's part of the order of things. There's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times. It's all part and parcel of the nature of what life is. So, what I would say is believe in your own personal power, that you'll be able to get through hard times and that your resilience will shine through. Never be afraid to seek help, and just realize that anyone who judges, projects, or is unkind is somebody who's hurting inside, that has their own work to do, and that whatever is happening within them has nothing to do with you. And you're on your own journey, and it's on your own terms, and you're the only one who can do something about it, and there is help to be had.
That is amazing advice. Thank you so much, Joyce. It was a really good conversation we had today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Vermont.